Welcome to Fresh Off the Reel. My name is Jesse. I'm here with a couple friends. If you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm
Is it-
Ivan.
I'm
I
Jamie.
you go next.
I am Alex.
Hello, I'm Michael.
Best for last. I'm Ellen.
And this is a weekly podcast that we'll be doing where my friends here, who have not seen a lot of the classic films, will be sitting down and watching them with me and just discussing them as first time viewers. Today we're starting with Jurassic Park from 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg. And I know Alex and Jamie, you have not seen this film. What are some of your expectations going in?
Dinosaurs and Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I know that this is considered a very big film for the start of modern CGI. I hear it's aged very well, considering it was made over 20 years ago now. So yeah, that's one thing I'm gonna enjoy seeing and poking my brain at is just like, ooh, look at these fancy slimy looking dinosaurs.
For the rest of you, what kind of expectations do you have watching it as a group? And what do you think that first time viewers should look for?
As an expectation as the group, I feel as if I hope everyone likes it, and I hope it still holds up to what I remember it being as a kid and the other times I watched it, because it did age very well, and I really hope it meets the expectations of the others. I have high hopes that everyone will like it.
Ellen, as this is one of your favorite films, what are you expecting?
Well, and you know this, I watch movies just to kind of watch movies, and even then, I don't watch a ton of movies. So, watching it with a group, I'm really excited to hear what everyone thinks and like what kind of meaning they gather from each, like a specific part or the whole movie, you know. So, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Mike, any expectations from you?
Well, here's the thing. I also, like Alex and Jamie, never actually watched it in full. I've watched bits and pieces, but I've never been able to watch the entire movie in one sitting. So I don't know much about what's gonna happen in the movie. But from things I've heard from you, from Ivan, I've had really high expectations. I'm expecting the movie to be pretty well done cinematically, story wise, all that.
All right. With that, we will see you after the movie. And we're back. All right, so we just finished watching Jurassic Park. Let's start off. How did everyone feel about it?
Fucking iconic. Oh, can we say fuck?
Yes.
Way to check
I
after
like-
the fact.
Yeah, right. No, but
Fucking
seriously, that was.
iconic.
I can see why it is such a
Yeah,
iconic movie. It's
yeah,
pretty great. Stressful, but great.
very. Oh my
Stressful.
god.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg definitely took a lot of inspiration from Hitchcock suspense films, which I really love. Alex, how did you feel?
Half naked Jeff Goldblum.
A great way to sum it up.
And what about you, Mike?
It was honestly very good. Like Jamie said, very, very stressful at certain parts. Like, for example, with the electric gate part, I was on the edge of my seat because I was worried, like, are they going to make it? Is the kid going to get off in time or not? In the car scene, with the car falling down from the tree, that was also... Ooh.
Um, Ivan, as someone who's seen the film, what are some things that you enjoy about it?
I've always been a big fan of dinosaurs in general, especially the Velociraptors. one of the things I still hold up to me that I really think I still like is that when they mentioned that the Velociraptors were problem solving and all that, that they actually like kept that true to it and didn't just write it off as like just a random fact in the movie.
Yeah,
Right,
That
that's
they
true.
right.
that they kept it like, oh, they do know how to open doors, they do know how to get out of situations, and if you notice, um, where he said in the beginning how one keeps an eye on you and the other two attack. If you remember what he said, killed all of them but the other two. So they seems like they only hunt in packs of threes.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's a scene where you actually see this hunting method in motion, the clever girl scene, and
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see a theory played out and be correct.
Yeah.
And it's not even that. Like it even like showed that like they're even well the outsmart even the skilled hunters. Like that guy was.
Yeah.
Right.
For
He's a
example,
very
that.
skilled hunter who got taken out by an animal that was way before his
Yeah.
time.
And finally, we come to
Basically,
Ellen. This is one of your favorites, as you said. So, what draws you to this movie?
Well, I have seen this movie so many times, but like I said, I just watch movies to watch movies and I just love dinosaurs. But this time, I really tried to just watch the symbolism and it hit me in such a different way this time around. Like, it was really emotional. It just really got me, like, really paying attention to how man is this all powerful creation, but it's just this false sense of power. And, like, I don't know. It's just really cool to see how like cause and effect and consequences, natural consequences to greed and every other actions that humans make. So I thought those were
Mhm. All right, so let's use greed as sort of our starting up point here. Um, Hammond is established early in the movie as someone with a lot of money who is willing to fund digs for Dr. Sattler and Dr. Grant. And he seems to have this hubris about his park and the safety of it, thinks that he can make the most money off of it. And as we see throughout the movie, he constantly mentions how he spared no expense. And I wanted to talk about that motif throughout the film if somebody wants to jump off of that.
The one thing I enjoyed about his character is, despite the fact that he was clearly doing this as a business person and not someone trying to specifically advance the science of archaeology and things like that, I liked how they still made him a very human character despite that. Like there was genuine concern for the safety of those that would be involved in this park, and there was genuine concern over making sure that these creatures were treated with dignity and respect. And I like that they didn't just go for the obvious fucking monopoly monocle I'm doing this for the money thing. I think that added element made the story itself much more emotional because, like, despite the fact that it was a business, there was still grief over the loss of what he was doing because he loved doing it, you know?
I find that kind of interesting because I look at him as a more compelling villain because
Mhm.
he can seem a little bit more human. But at the end of the day, he brought his grandchildren to an untested park where his biggest concern was entertainment and not the safety.
Safety.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
The whole spare no expense thing I think is really ironic because, and it was a quote, another quote in the movie, like just control is an illusion. He thought he planned out everything, but like you can't
Mhm.
plan for every single thing, which is a big like underlying theme in the movie.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of just, you know, you can see throughout everything, like every line and every action.
I feel as if it also shows that because like of Hammond, like kind of the way he is, the instability he had between him and the big guy that caused all the chaos to begin.
Dennis, Mr.
Yeah,
Nedry.
if you remember, him and Dennis had an argument over financial issues, and that Dennis was basically just betraying him. Dennis basically became like a form of like envy and wrath and kind of gluttony at the same time, where he
Mhm.
just wanted all the power. He knew kind of what was going to happen, but he didn't care. All he looked out was number one, and in the end, because he had no one else, he ended up dying alone. Unfortunately, other people were cared about. I feel as if things could have been different between him and Hammond, and if Hammond kind of wasn't this kind of cocky billionaire, maybe it would have ended out completely different. People would have been alright. But even still, there were still a lot of faulties in their security, like how close the car could even get to the fences. Like I feel as if there were just a lot of issues that could have been solved upon just by that.
I didn't
Or
even
what?
think about that. How close those vehicles are to the fence. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's a huge safety concern. Obviously, you want to be able to see these creatures up close, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to
Like
think about the safety too.
like
How
I
long?
know like it's 10,000 volts, but like that's a huge animal. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
animals tear right through a fence before, a bull tear right through a electrified fence when it gets full speed, and they don't really know how these dinosaurs would react to something suspicious like that, like kind of like how sharks in the water are curious about humans swimming, and they're like, what is this? What is that? They never seen a moving vehicle. They're gonna be like, what is that? Especially since the T-Rex is based off of movement, a moving vehicle going right past. Oh look, it's prey. It's a game. It's hunting. Full force going. It's gonna tear right through that, no matter even if electrocuted it.
I think there's Hammond being the gray zone of that middle ground of being a business person who does not fully realize what he's getting into, but his wealth and his perception of his level of preparation of this leads to a worse outcome than if he had been more morally focused on the people. But then you have the fact that a lot of this failure wasn't entirely on him. There was Dennis who did intervene and shut down all of the major security features, and that's what caused the problem. I think I don't know. I just really think that despite Hammond's not 100% perfection on the design of the park, I think his humanness still showed when it came to how he handled the failures and things like that. I feel like that painting him as a compelling villain is much more gray than that.
I
Um,
agree. I feel like, yeah, Hammond is definitely more of a gray villain, and then Dennis is definitely like a straight up like villain because he was just motivated by money. There was literally that was all it was for him. It was just money and then trying to get out. I feel like once he stopped being important to the plot, they just killed him off. But yeah, it was definitely Hammond being the gray villain and then Dennis being the straight up villain, if that makes sense.
I think it's important to realize that it wasn't just we don't need him anymore. It was that greed is not going to get you anywhere. A really interesting and poignant shot is after he dies, seeing the Barbasol can get washed away. The only piece of branding in the movie being washed away drives home that point of money and greed will not get you where you need to be.
And I gotta say, I feel that the plot line involving Dennis were cut short too early and didn't have enough payoff. Like, I don't feel it was made 100% clear what those samples that he stole were going to create and why he felt it was worthy, besides money, to like risk his everything for it.
It
Does
is a
that
line
count
at the
though?
very beginning. They are
Yeah, well,
embryos.
Yeah, I know what they are, but I feel like that they're everything moved so quick with Dennis, while the rest of the movie was much more paced out. Every step felt like it had a lot more thought. I feel like outside of shutting down the park, that the whole Dennis plot line didn't add much.
yeah, I
I think
believe Dennis was mainly put in as a catalyst for everything that happened, not really put in to think of it as the character, like a antagonist or anything. I personally believe that they put Nedry as just a catalyst for what happened in the park.
Mhm. What were you saying, Ellen?
I I think he's there just to prove the point that I can do this, so I'm going to, you know? And like the thing about his character that I find really interesting, every time I watch a movie or watch this movie with people, when he dies, everyone's always like, "Yeah, karma, like that's what you get." But then it's like, but that's just another, like, just a genuine human reaction. Like, how is that for us to decide, like if he deserved that or not? That is always what that's like, that his end scene reminds me of or makes me think of, if that makes sense.
I would say that it it's kind of like karma, and like we shouldn't decide, but I feel as if because of him and kind of his wicked ways, it was kind of fate telling him to like forcing him towards his end
Okay.
because he hit the sign, crushed the sign, he lost direction, and thus just randomly he came across the Dilophosaur, which was going to be his end game. So, and he was blinded by greed, and if you remember when the Dilophosaur spit out its tar
Oh
thing, it
yeah,
blinded him. So I think
absolutely. Like,
it was
find that absolutely,
displayed.
like
Yeah,
that was how the movie was supposed to go, but I'm just saying, like our reaction at, like, yeah, like how is that for us? I don't know, it just kind of, it's just a constant cycle of like predator and prey.
We've talked very little about the actual dinosaurs so far. What did you guys think of the dinosaurs in general, as well as their effects and how they hold up today?
For the time of the movie being made and stuff like that, the CGI and the animatronics for the dinosaurs and stuff like that was really good for the time. But now here in 2020, you can see just slight flaws in the CGI, making it look a little more like stand out. Like, yeah, that's CGI. The animatronic portion was still fantastic. You could tell the animatronic portion they was made to actually be recognized as like, okay, this was done really well. We want to make sure that people believe it. The
Right.
CGI in nowadays time with a little modern technology just slowly coming forward.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I realized watching this time is the CGI looks awful in the sun. It's very much harder to hide your flaws with your limitations on CGI when you have direct sunlight, which is what makes the T Rex scene in the rain look so much better. It's dark, there's rain coming down, and the mix of animatronics with the CGI makes it very hard to discern what is CGI. I think darkness worked to their advantage.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the first scene where we saw the first dinosaurs, where it was like direct sunlight, and that kind of looked a little not that great CGI wise, but like you said, with the darker scenes in the rain and stuff, it looked a lot better.
see the
Like I
panda
think it definitely held up.
and stuff.
That's always a big thing for me. It's like a bad CGI job can take me out of a movie in milliseconds. And the only time that happened was the first time we saw a dinosaur, which I think is really unfortunate because it's like that's the first impression that we get. And like at the time it would have still did and should have blown mine, but in terms of scenes that are a bit more timeless in their CGI, I think it's an unfortunate misstep that the first impression of CGI in the movie we get is one in direct sunlight where we can see all the flaws.
It does make sense at the time to show your first dinosaur in direct light. Well, the first time you see one fully, because you want to marvel at this creature and see it for all that it is. But you're right, it does become a detriment in the future. What about the velociraptors, which were mainly puppets?
Loved
They
it.
were
I
they were
not gonna lie,
puppets.
I love the Velociraptor.
Yeah, the Velociraptors were really well made.
Um, Again in the darkness where they had the kitchen scene,
Hmm.
it like again you could hide your flaws from when they actually had to show full body and them hopping up on the table. Yeah, like it's I still love the animatronic for it.
I love the way that the velociraptors were handled. Like the power play that happens between these humans who have the brain capacity to have ego and cockiness about their step as they go after what they view as, smarter than average, but still animal level intelligence, and then being outsmarted. But then, like, you have the scene in the kitchen where the kid and these dinosaurs are sitting at like nearly equal levels of power, mental power, of course. Not saying the kids could kick the velociraptors to death. I love the velociraptors being this element of testing the others, testing all the other characters either on intelligence or with the T Rex testing on strength. And I think that's a really fun dynamic to have in a creepy, scary thing.
How did the horror elements work for you all?
They did for like I'm not easy to scare, but there are certain things that will give you like the shivers. I think just in general being in close quarter proximity to a velociraptor of a creature that can literally just tear you limb from limb, I would have to say gives kind of like a shiver a little bit because of the thought of being that close to something so deadly is kind of just a little unnerving. But I also love the fact that when the T Rex makes this roar in the distance when they come looking for everyone, that you don't know where it's coming from, if it's coming from the back or anything. The roar echoes so much, and it's just there, or the Velociraptor is just hunting you, and you don't know where the others are, and it just sends a form of anxiety into you, like a primitive feeling of being hunted in the dark by other creatures.
Hmm.
See, I wasn't scared. I don't really see. Okay, so let me rephrase that. So I don't really see Jurassic Park as a horror movie. I keep forgetting that it might be classified that way. I see it more as like a thriller, which I don't know if there's a difference or not. It's just stressful and anxiety inducing, but not scary, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not really a horror film, but there are certain tricks that Spielberg employs to create this suspense and this anxiety that are usually found in horror films.
I think the best example of that was with the T Rex because of specifically the back and forth. The one cart, you have the two smart people who know to stay still and not move. And then it jumps over to these people who have no idea and they're making noise and shining lights and moving. And that forces the other ones who know that the best thing to do is to stay still to take action. And one takes action and potentially removes the issue, but then the other takes a similar but different action that then brings the danger close again. And I think that back and forth of going between, okay, we know what to do, we're going to manage this crisis, to I'm panicking and I'm going to die because of it. I think that was one of the best examples of it.
I personally really like the suspenseful aspect of when the T Rex is on its way because nobody else could really tell, but you could tell from the water, from either the footprint in the puddle in that one scene with the T Rex or in the cups, just the vibration from the water. And like the closer it got, the more it looked like it was like getting worse. The closer the T Rex was getting. I love the suspense of them realizing it and slowly realizing they need to have the act, or they might not make it.
Thank you for bringing that up because that is one of the most famous shots, not just in this movie, but in cinema. The vibration of the water building this suspense, every boom, and then the little shake, and then another boom, and then another little shake. It builds this suspense until the T Rex is finally revealed. Not only that, but I think you remember me watching that scene, suddenly talking about how much of a genius Spielberg was. He employed a tactic which is don't reveal the monster until about an hour in, and the T Rex doesn't show up until we're already halfway through the movie. They just keep building towards it, and you feel all these little pieces coming together and creating this tension so that when it's finally revealed, you feel just as scared as the characters.
I have to agree with that. I love the fact that it's not the sight, but it's the thought of it being there is what scares people. I love that you only hear or know that they're by rustling the bushes, but you never see them, and it installs a certain type of fear into people of not knowing what the unknown is by not knowing.
And now that you've brought it up, like that's something that thinking back on my emotions watching it, there was definitely for a good chunk of the movie this anticipation of I want to see this T-Rex, I want to see this T-Rex. Pointing out that was a calculated choice. I can really appreciate the level of excitement it built for that quote unquote monster.
There is one more big thing that I want to talk about, and I've saved this for last because I think it's the most important theme in the movie, and that is the theme of parenthood. It starts with Grant right at the beginning hating kids, not wanting kids, threatening a child with a claw,
Oh
and
yeah,
throughout the movie, he has to learn to be a parent, and we see that kind of build as
that
the
kind of
movie
character
goes
development.
on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I noticed that. I mean, I kind of saw that was coming, just because that's kind of that I've seen a little bit of Jurassic Park before. So I was like, where are these kids coming in? So like when he said, "Oh, my grandkids are coming," I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, no, like in the scene where they're all getting into the cars for the first time, and I think it was either Tim or Lex. One of them was trying to hold his hand, and he was like trying to take it away. And then like a few scenes later, he's like grabbing their hands and stuff without them like prompting him or anything. I just thought that was interesting character development.
Yeah, character development. Granted, have a big thing of character development. Even though right off the get go from the start of the movie, I knew like that's gonna be a big thing that happens is he become a parent. Partially because I seen little bits of the movie prior to this, but also because of the way he acted and his finding characteristics. What he is an archaeologist who doesn't know much about technology, and he was very not like kid that much. Just from that opening stuff we see of Grant, I knew immediately like by the end of this, one of those three are going to happen. He either gonna take like kids, gonna get used to technology, or he no longer gonna be an archaeologist or something.
Man versus technology is also huge throughout the movie. The idea of progress for the sake of progress without thinking of the consequences, which is something that we were touching on earlier.
I
One of the things I noticed in character development with Grant comes from that claw, and it was something that I had discussed with Ellen.
I mean, it's when they're hiding in the tree, right? And which is a huge bonding moment because it's like it's the first time since everything started going downhill where they're finally not in a super stressful environment. Like they're settling down for the night. They had a good experience with these harmless dinosaurs and they're like laying down to sleep and he's showing them the claw that he used to threaten the other child like in the beginning of the movie, and then he just has this, you can see on his face like this epiphany, like I don't need this anymore, and he just tosses it aside, which I never noticed before. I was just like, oh, he just threw away this relic. Like, okay. But then Jesse pointed out, like, he discarded it because he doesn't need it anymore.
I see it as this was used to threaten kids, but I'm getting used to the idea of kids and no longer find need for this.
Which
And
is really funny. I'm so sorry. I
no, go
totally
ahead.
interrupted. Like, I'm not going to spoil the other movies, but I feel like it's just like the rest of the movies do not turn out how everyone thinks it's going to turn out based on the first movie and like
Mm,
these interactions.
that's because the other ones weren't written
Ugh,
with any sort of thought process.
Cared.
agree to disagree.
The
Like,
rest of the movies are just man is trapped, dinosaur eats man, watch dinosaur eat man, yay.
I'm glad this thing with the claw is brought up because I feel that the symbolic beat of him throwing away the claw happened a little early. I feel that his character growth in him deciding to be a parent or learning to be a parent was not complete enough for the symbolic gesture of throwing that away in that moment.
Where would you have put it?
That's a harder question. I think it would have been after the electric fence scene at some point. I think that's around the point. Like, that's something that got brought up as he was climbing the tree. He was being very nonchalant and non emotional about the fact that this kid just got thrown in a jeep down a cliff and in a tree and could very well be dead.
I, believe-
But after the electric fence and there was like emotion and fear of losing this child, I think that beat needed to happen for the full impact, in my opinion, of throwing away that symbolic gesture of I don't like kids.
I personally feel like at that scene with the car, when Grant was very nonchalant climbing up the tree to check on the kid, I personally feel like he was acting calm and reasonable to have to keep the other one calm because that one was very scared, very panicked, very nervous. So he sort of saw with her that if he acts stressed and worried about Tim, then she's gonna start acting worried and panic even more, which is something that they knew can't happen, or else they would risk getting harmed. So that's why he had to so calm and very relaxed throughout that.
That's a perfectly valid take. I just feel that the electric fence scene had a lot more emotional urgency behind it, just in general. And I feel like that moment was, at least from my perspective, where I feel the character growth of Grant becoming a parental figure was fully realized.
I want to bring up Lex's freak out at that moment because she says a line that I didn't realize until watching some other people's takes on the film, but she is freaking out, and what she keeps repeating is, he left us, he left us.
In
Now,
response to Gennaro just
it,
outright leaving.
in the moment, sure, it could have something to do with the lawyer leaving, but on a more symbolic level, she's with her grandfather on this island right now because her parents are getting a divorce, and she keeps repeating, he left us. It gives this idea that not this lawyer left us, but our father left us. And that is compounded by Alan Grant saying, but I'm not going to do that, which sort of starts his fatherhood journey.
Can I ask something? Maybe someone can explain to me about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, in the beginning, like it was a Velociraptor, right? They got the dino DNA from the mosquito, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, how did that transpire? How did they get the Velociraptor first?
Luck of the draw.
No, no, not that. The Velociraptor was first, and then when they went to the scene of them digging, and they pulled the mosquito out of it. But if you listen to the lawyer, they're talking about the tragedy that happened, which happened in the very first scene.
What I
How did they get the
believe going on,
Velociraptor?
I believe that what's going on there with the finding the mosquito and stuff like that that is them finding more specimens that they bring to the island and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
So
think
they
I
had
think
other mosquitoes
I,
before. That
yeah,
was
I
something
think it's
else.
implied that that was not the first mosquito that they found.
Alright, because like I was curious at first because it kind of threw me for a minute because they never mentioned anything else about it. So I was just curious and wondering was that a mess up?
Speaking of the mosquito thing, I would like to actually also mention at the end with Hammond's cane, with that having the amber bulb with a mosquito inside, and him looking at it longingly. It sort of, for me, felt like he was still longing for this idea that he had to be in fruition in some way, shape, or form. And he knows that he's incapable of doing it, so he hopes that someone else in the future would be able to.
I think that shot, for me, sort of symbolizes his ego and his greed. And looking at this mosquito reminds him of how far he pushed and how much he lost because of it.
I think the importance of him saying that he spared no expense has not been really spoken on yet. I think that's really important, especially like when the lawyer was talking about how much money they could charge and he said that everyone had a right to this. I think him constantly claiming that he spared no expense is a way to show that this was less about greed and more about bringing something worthwhile to a public yearning for it. For that to be repeated so often has to be a calculated move. It very much implies the fact that, he could have cut corners. He could have made things even less safe than they were and elected not to, despite the cost to him directly, because he wanted this to work. He really wanted this to work.
Does anyone have any last thoughts, feelings, opinions?
I'm not sure if everyone knows. If I remember right, the original ending to this movie, the T Rex was actually supposed to follow them out onto the helipad as the helicopter took off. That was originally supposed to be the scene instead of where the T Rex is now.
I kind of love the T Rex's final shot roaring into the air as this man made sign of when dinosaurs ruled the earth, falling down in front of her. I think that's more iconic, and I'm not sure that it would have had the same emotional impact had they tried to do one more action scene.
It was originally supposed to be like an action chase, but then they changed it up for that. It was only ever written down in storyboard. They never filmed anything for it.
I was just gonna say that I agree with Jesse. I think that was a perfect way to end that. Just the symbolism of it all. It was just really, like she said, iconic.
I love that even though once it broke free, it didn't care anything else about like people there or anything. I love that the T Rexes went back to doing what it did if it was like 63 million years ago. It just
Mm-hmm.
went back and started grazing and just hunted for when it needed to and just kept going. Just like and just picked up right where it left off.
A plot thread that was present that I felt never went anywhere, and it was a little disappointing. They made it very clear that all of these dinosaurs were females, and then Jeff Goldblum, whose character in the movie I cannot remember right now.
Ian Malcolm.
Okay, Ian was saying that nature finds a way, and then like they find the bits of egg left and have like an implication that one might be male or something like that. There were just these moments where they seemed like they were building up to something and it never went anywhere. And it juxtaposed compared to some of the other build-ups they had that actually did go somewhere that I felt fell flat.
See, and this is why I disagree with Jesse with all the love in my heart. They carry these on into the other movies, and I so desperately want to talk about it, but I won't. But they definitely, I don't know, I think the threads just keep going throughout Jurassic Park, and it doesn't get more deep, Like it definitely stays at the same level, but it just kind of evolves. And like evolution obviously is such a huge component of this. And just like the little like minutia of it. And I don't know. My ending thought is just like, wow, dinosaurs like
Jeff Goldblum's daughter kicks a velociraptor through a window by
yeah.
swinging on a pipe.
It's
The rest of the movies are nowhere near the
I don't
same
know.
level of quality.
The ending, okay, like Jurassic World Part 2
Okay.
is a whole different.
Another
Yeah,
very
we're
important
talking about.
character in the movie that I saw that we haven't talked much about, and that's partially because of how little of a scene time they got, and that was Mr. Dodgson. Dodgson? I
Dodgson?
don't know. Yeah.
Mm.
Like all we get from him is like he wants these eggs. We don't understand any motive. We don't understand anything about him. We just have him for that brief little moment, and then we hear nothing about him for the rest of the movie. I don't know if like he has any sort of significance in the series. I don't know if he ever makes a return with someone else to get these eggs and stuff.
He was like basically a part of like I don't think they ever mentioned in any other movie, but he's basically with just a competing science group or something like that that wanted to capitalize on what Hammond had and Hammond wouldn't share it with them, so they thought probably the only way to do it was to get someone from the inside to steal it. I don't
And
know what group he might have been a part of. I have no idea. For all we know, he could have been an activist group. For all we know, I don't know, but that's basically the pretense I got. He was a competing group.
and like we don't really get to know much about him in this movie, and I don't know if like we hear anything more about these people that Dodgson worked with about this, or if there's anyone else who worked in there that was also part of their group or stuff like that.
You would probably have to read the books to probably find that out.
Yeah,
Mm.
well,
They might mention it somewhere there.
that
Michael Crichton, who wrote the books, did work on the screenplay for this movie, which is, I think, part of why it's so fantastic. If you do read the books, they are a lot darker.
The coffee
Really
scene.
fantastic read, but a lot darker.
I'm not gonna spoil for it, but there's a really dark scene that involves the compies, and it's kind of really, really dark. I think you know what I'm talking about, Jesse.
Mm.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
Any other thoughts?
It was a damn fine movie.
Agreed.
All
10
right,
out of 10.
let's get some ratings out of 10 from each of you. We'll start with Jamie.
Okay, I just said 10 out of 10, but I'm going to say 9 out of 10 just because I never give a perfect rating. But also, there were some little bits and things where it's just like, oh, hey, plot armor. They probably should be dead.
Alex.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 8 out of 10. Still one of the best movies I've seen, but the 2 points it has not earned are moments like what Jamie just said with plot armor kind of taking away some tension in the ending bit, as well as the couple loose plot ends that got talked about that I felt fall flat. But as a whole composition, still really, really damn good.
Mike.
I also have to give it an 8 out of 10. Alex more or less hit it on the nail. Why my score would be the case. Plot armor, like a bunch of things that would normally possibly cause an end to a person, they didn't have killed them because story wise they need them alive later in the story. And also a bunch of plot hooks like what did happen to what's his name's arm that we end up with just the arm. The guy that always smoked a cigarette, I forgot his name off the top of my head.
Samuel
Fucking
L.
Samuel L.
Jackson.
Or or like what about the other dinosaurs? What are becoming of them? Are they attacking also like cutting there are probably other carnivores in there? Why just focus on them? Stuff like that. There's a bunch of like loose ends like they didn't think about implementing.
Ivan.
I'm gonna give it a 9.5. The reason it doesn't get a solid 10 is because like the plot armor, and now that I see the patchiness of the CGI, now that I'm older and I'm not just like, oh, dinosaur. It doesn't just get the extra 5 points only because just that and the simple fact that we didn't get enough see enough of Mr. Motherfucker himself.
I would give it a 9 out of 10 myself. I think some of the CGI needs some work. There are definitely some plot points that could have been fleshed out more, but I still think the writing is solid and the theme is fantastic. So, yeah, 9 out of 10. And Ellen.
All right. I am giving this 10 out of 10. And the reason
Okay.
being,
That is your
like,
favorite movie?
not no, okay, I can be unbiased. Well, no, because like the whole point of this movie is like, you can strive for perfection as much as you want, but nothing is ever going to be perfect. And that's why I think this movie is perfect because it kind of just like demonstrated that. Like, yeah, there are plot holes and, all that stuff, but they tried their best and they did a really good job. The acting was amazing. Like, for the time, the effects were amazing. The plot line was amazing. 10 out of
Well, I'm glad you guys all came on this journey with me. Jurassic Park is such a fantastic film. Until next time, I'll see you guys all later.